So let me tell you something about him. He got his undergraduate and doctoral degrees from MIT and then from Stanford for his PhD, both in chemical physics. And then he became a faculty member at Berkeley, and he was there as a professor for 18 years. And he's spent time in many other universities around the world. He's currently Graham Purdue Professor of Chemistry and Director of the Center for Computational Quantum Chemistry at the University of Georgia. He's one of the most highly cited physical scientists in the world, and for those of you that worry about these things or know what they are, his H-index is 116. Many of us won't know that, but that means he's published 116 papers with at least 116 citations, which means that he's having quite an impact in the world. But for those of you that are still doing degrees, whether it's undergraduate or postgraduate, here's a very good hint from him. If you become very respected, then you start getting honorary degrees and you don't have to write anything for them. At least I assume you don't. And Henry has 30 of these, so he's got 30 honorary degrees. Anyway, apart from all that history, and if I told you his whole CV, there would be no time for his lecture, so I won't tell you anything else, except that he has given lectures on science, the interface between science and Christianity, apparently at more than 200 universities, so we're very honoured that he's coming to give a lecture on that topic here. So, over to you.
Thank you, Bob. Good to be here. This might be the first lecture parodies to this the Royal Society of Chemistry paid for. Actually here for many of the editors of a journal here, some chemists here, you might call Physical Chemistry, Chemical Physics, or as it's known to the rest of the world, PCCP. So here we are. And I think it's going to work, right? This is where we work. Look out here to see if there's anybody I know. If I know you come up later on, you can come back. This is where we work, Center for Computational Quantum Chemistry. I think this is still the only building in the academic world devoted exclusively to computational chemistry. And so, we have this thing called American football, which I'm sure none of you. I know they're playing a game in London every year. And this building of ours was paid for by the University of Georgia football team. They are very wealthy, much wealthier than the rest of the university. So here's my research group. This is about 2 months old, and it's pretty typical, about 15 PhD students. You'll see one senior person there, and this is a great group of just tremendous. We are now recruiting for the class of 2022 because we get them out in 4 years, and things are looking promising. We'll have another good class showing up next August. Okay, everybody has a worldview, gets it from his or her own experiences, and from them it all comes together. And I would say good, okay, worldview, and that would be that'd be dangerous to say. A carefully thought out worldview reflects the deep hunger among human beings for an overarching framework to bring unity to their lives. And get right into the title here. No need to wait. This C.S. Lewis quote from the autobiography of his early life, Surprised by Joy. He said, "You will understand that my atheism was inevitably based on what I believed to be the findings of the sciences." And if you know much about the life of C.S. Lewis, he never took any courses in sciences, but somebody told him that science disproved God, and he went with it for about 10, 15 years until he became a Christian and found out otherwise. Those findings, his atheist friends, not being a scientist, for him to say he's not being a scientist, that's certainly true. I had to take on trust, in fact, on authority. Now, I'm not going to get through all of these. I have to be careful to finish, but this is the Schrödinger quotation I kind of like. It's from this little book he wrote 22 years after he got the Nobel Prize. But there's just one thing I want to point to here. It says, "I'm astonished that the scientific picture, the real world around me is very deficient. Gives a lot of factual information, puts all our experience in a magnificent, consistent order, but it's silent about everything that really matters to us. And so I go, and then here, this is last sentence, important thing to look at. It says that sometimes science pretends to answer questions in these domains, ultimate questions, but the answers are very often so silly that we are not inclined to take seriously. I'm not going to apply that to anybody who's living, but I might tell you something about it if you ask me privately. This is from an interview of Schaefer, cosmologist, Nobel Prize, 1983, and the author is his friend Wally, and it's quite a. This is from the biography of Schaefer, and he starts it out by saying, in fact, I consider myself an atheist. I have a feeling of disappointment because the hope for contentment and a peaceful outlook on life as a result of pursuing a goal has remained unfulfilled. The author had been working on this book for 3 years. I guess I should say that this book has been reviewed in probably 15 chemistry and other scientific physics and other scientific journals. And every single one of these reviews, this is an appendix to the book, this interview. And it's only 4 or 5 pages long. And in every one of the reviews links up with this. So biographer's been working on the book for 3 years. He says, get it? He says, this is the author. You mean single-minded pursuit of science, understanding parts of nature, comprehending nature with such enormous success, still leave you with a feeling of disappointment. Senator Schaefer is not going to give any ground on this. He says, I don't really have a sense of fulfillment. All I've done seems to be not very much. And he says, don't you think this is common? And Senator Schaefer says, well, it may be. But the fact that it's common doesn't make it any less personal. He says, what is true? I always try to get young PhD students to think about this one quotation here in terms of their own lives. He says, what's true for my own personal case is I simply don't have that sense of harmony, which I'd hoped for when I was young, and I have persevered in science for over 50 years. The time I've devoted to other things is minuscule. So a bit of a warning for people who think that in science alone there's going to be great fulfillment in life. I'll just get a little bit of this. It's from Alan Lightman, MIT professor, in this book comes by Where to Do Good Professor. He says, contrary to popular myths, scientists appear to have the same range of attitudes about religious matters as does the general public. So the concept that science has disproved God is not looking very good from any of this stuff. Eugene Figner, Nobel Prize, interesting person too. Figner, along with others, brilliant individuals, came from a Jewish family in Budapest, born about the turn of the century, around 1900, and he got out of Budapest. It's a good thing he did, because his life had been briefer than it was. And moved to Princeton and wandered into Protestantism. Readily. There he talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics and remarked that the miracle of the appropriation of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift that we neither understand nor deserve. This is great. Now, I have known students that said that, at least for them, mathematics was not unreasonably effective. In fact, some even went so far as to say that mathematics was entirely ineffective in their studies. And it's the way it is. But as far as Wigner is concerned, it's this wonderful gift. And then we could go further and ask, who is the giver of the gift? And I think I'll let that pass. Why might a scientist become a Christian? Well, the comprehensibility of the universe might point to be something about a sovereign creator God, It might even go so far as to say mathematical physics made me do it. The laws of nature look just like as if they've been selected as the most simple and elegant principles of understandable change by a wise creator. And I suspect belief in the decipherability of nature's strongness, existence of a cosmic mind who can construct nature in accordance with rational laws. Yeah, look, I'm going to quote C.S. Lewis again. I teach a 1 hour a week course on C.S. Lewis at my university, and he says things very well. Atheism turns out to be too simple. If the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning. This is from Christianity. I think it's terrific. It's something to think hard about. Blaise Pascal. I'm not going to have too many of these old timers because I'm going to get to the present pretty quickly. But one has to say, Pascal, one of the greatest scientists and mathematicians ever. Probably the only physical scientist to make profound contributions to Christian thinking. Published the Pensées, 1670 Pensées, these thoughts in French. And I had to read this book at MIT. My second year there. They're trying to civilize the nerds at that point, and they tried for a while, but really didn't work. So they're not doing that anymore. It's just all death and science all the time. But I read this book, and I thought it was pretty good, and I really missed the bottom line. I didn't see this at all, that Pascal's theology was centered on the person of Jesus Christ as Savior based on personal experience. And one of the better known statements of his is that God makes people conscious of their inward wretchedness, and his infinite mercy unites himself to their inmost soul, fills it with humility and joy, with confidence and love, renders it incapable of any other end than himself. Jesus Christ is the end of all and the center to which all tends. Michael Faraday, the greatest experimental scientist of all time. I get few. I had one person once tell me he thought Ernst Rutherford was a better experimental scientist, but most everybody's on my side. These are some of his last. You might say this is his last interview. He's very ill, and a well-wisher comes to him on his death, and it says, "Michael, with speculations, do you have that?" Now that might seem like a little bit of a silly thing to say, but if you've been around people who have been dying, and I haven't done a lot of that, but I know that the most natural thing in the world is to say anything, something to like the situation, because these things be heavy. And that's the sense, and it's not that weird of a question to ask, because Faraday's whole scientific career was to think about things, make a hypothesis, go into the lab, and test his hypothesis. And the thing that's so great about Faraday's work is that whether things turned out the way he had intuited them or not, the result was important. Faraday said, speculations, I have certain. I played God at adult risk my dying head of speculation, where I know whom I believed, and I persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. And first time I used this, it was a young person, picked up Faraday's drill close to the front. And before I revealed the last line, they said, "Oh, I didn't know." Like Faraday said, that's just so cool. I had to explain to them it was about 1,800 years off in the dating of that statement. Maxwell, the second of the three great theoretical physicists. There's something in here that is good here. This is from a biographer. He said that, he says, Maxwell had all the gifts necessary for revolutionary advances in theoretical physics. Profound grasp of physical reality, certainly. Okay. Great mathematical ability, certainly. Total absence of preconceived notions. The person that wrote this must not be a scientist. When I go into the lab and no preconceived notions, I end up with nothing. Nothing in and nothing out. Great scientists have lots of preconceived notions. creative imagination, the highest order, of course, and talks about Faraday's equation. Certainly one of the great achievements of the human intellect. But when I was the second year taking electromagnetism at MIT, we got Maxwell's equations pretty fast in the first semester. And there are four of them, and we needed to know what they were and how to use them. And this was daunting for some of us. There was one member of the class who was quite entrepreneurial in nature, and he printed out 900 T-shirts with Faraday's Maxwell's equations on the front and on the back. And we wore them to class on the examination day. This physics professor, I mean, it was so enjoyable. I could even to watch him marching around. And, it looked like he's going to explode. The average on the first quiz was 99%. The average on the second quiz was 17%. So, for you who are still students, be careful with professors. This is trust as well. Think what God is determined to do to all those who submit themselves to his righteousness and willing to receive his gift. They be conformed to the image of his Son, and when that is fulfilled and God sees that they are conformed to the image of Christ, there can be no more condemnation. That does skip that. I'm in Cambridge, okay? Now, there's something over the front door of the old Cambridge laboratory, but it's in Latin. Okay, now I brought my daughter here with me the previous visit, and because she's a Latin scholar, and so she translated, and I said, "Now let me show it to you in English." So I went to the old the New Cavendish Library, which I run by quite frequently, and there it is in English. They realized that nobody knows Latin anymore. The works of the Lord are great, sought out of all them that have flesh and measure. Now, this is going to hit pretty hard, published by Blackness. Most distinguished scientists historically were religious believers. And, I mean, he's being pretty broad there, but they were Christians. Therefore, what may be said about those who insist that science and Christianity are compatible, insist that science has disproved God? And he's pretty strong here. I don't know if I'd be quite this strong, but what he says, regrettably, we must attribute to such persons intellectual blindness, self-deception, or hypocrisy. Their implausible accusation of incompatibility would indict the majority of scientists who ever lived at not grasping what they were doing. Okay, now here is a list of distinguished scientists, Christians, okay? And this is the Hall of Fame of science. But there are plenty more who are living. You don't have anybody in there that is a sperm, but maybe that one. There's at least one person in this room I'm going to talk about, so we'll have from there, okay? Oh, now, people have objected to this. The first time I showed this, hey, what's the deal here? Everybody that lived in 17th, 18th, 19th, early 20th century, these people are they're all churchgoers, and so this really doesn't prove anything. Well, my response to that is consider the Hall of Fame of the humanities and ask yourself, what are their thinkings about the spiritual world? So here's the Hall of Fame. Thomas Hobbes, Spinoza, Voltaire, Hugo Rousseau, Kant, Gibbon, Bentham, Hegel, Emerson, Feuerbach, Rome, Nietzsche. This is the Hall of Fame for the humanities. And atheists, agnostics, deists, all kinds of skeptics. There is something peculiarly Christian about the sciences. And I'd like to see somebody write a whole book on this, but I think the evidence is pretty clear. So a few examples. Arthur Schawlow, one of my professors at Stanford, Nobel Prize in Physics in 1981, he identified himself as a Christian. Now, Schawlow was quite an interesting person. He was approximately spherical, was about that tall, like that wide, that deep, and this one, approximately spherical. Now, the reason I mention this is you have been told at some point in your life that people who are large are very happy. And I'm sorry none of you met Arthur Schawlow, because he was he was the happiest person, at least in the physics faculty at Stanford University. And joyful. All the students just loved him. We used to call him Artie to his back, but Professor Schawlow was the way he was addressed by students. And this is a good statement of his relating his Nobel Prize work in molecular spectroscopy, low temperature spectroscopy, to spiritual things. He says, we're fortunate to have the Bible, and especially the New Testament, which tells us so much about God in widely accessible human terms. Now, Schawlow believed to the core of his existence that every new scientific discovery he made was telling him a little bit more about God. But he didn't think these things were necessarily widely accessible in human terms. And in that sense, he contrasts the New Testament. This is about Rick Smalley. Rick Smalley and I have been friends forever, and Rick is no longer. Father of nanotechnology, Nobel Prize in chemistry, 1996. I met Rick, I think back in maybe 1981, when we interviewed him for a faculty position at Berkeley, and we didn't make it often because he was a little bit older because he'd done some time in the military. Of course, age discrimination is illegal, but if nobody talks about it, you can do it. And so we decided that he wasn't good enough for us at Berkeley. 2 years had gone by, and we didn't have a great future. Now, Smalley and I were good friends, and he was an outrageous atheist. In the Dawkins headed, but the difference is that Rick Smalley was a brilliant scientist, and Dawkins is a brilliant writer. Both have value. Both have value. I mean, Dawkins writes better than Rick Smalley, but he was outrageous. And he knew I was a Christian. Boy, we could have sit on a bus together at a conference without his taking me off, and I did my best to defend things, but it just wasn't working. Until about 5 years before he died, and he made this statement recently. I come back to church regularly. I mean, when I first saw this, I said, this is impossible. Somebody made this up. He said this. With a new focus to understand as best I can what it is that makes Christianity so vital and powerful in the lives of billions of people today, when almost 2,000 years have passed since the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Although I suspect I will never fully understand, I now think the answer is very simple. It's truth. And Smalley had a mind like a steel trap here. And he'd studied things a little bit more. Yeah, a little more. He said God did create the universe about 13.7 billion years ago. And of necessity has involved himself in this creation ever since. The purpose of this universe is something that only God knows for sure. But it is increasingly clear in modern science that the universe was exquisitely fine-tuned to enable human life. We are somehow critically involved in his purpose. Now, his last sentence here, it's not Greek theology, some might disagree, but this was a man with a passion for Jesus Christ. That's 5 years of life. So our job is to sense that purpose as best we can, love one another, and help God get the job done. Well, we'll let pass. And again, back to C.S. Lewis, book Miracles. It just spins these things out as if it were easy. He says in Miracles, man became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a legislator. About Professor, I'm going to let him go. Well, there's one thing. He's a very distinguished scientist coming on. This is their description of one of the most important awards in theoretical chemistry. They interviewed him. Said he's an evangelical Christian. Griffiths is also an amateur theologian and helps teach a course on Christianity and science. And then he's asked this question here, comes up with 3 years later. He said, we need an atheist for a debate. He said, if we need an atheist for a debate, I go to the philosophy department. The physics department isn't much use. Hey, there you are. Okay, now, I didn't know you were going to be here. But it's good. It's good. And I told you, I'm not going to insult you, so you could, don't worry. This is my host here. Professor Geophysics, Cambridge University, Delaware Society. Is that not true?
Mm-hmm. I think it wasn't a professor in 50. I was 2 years old in 54.
Oh, I bet you did your date of birth wrong. That's scandalous. Yeah, I'll fix it for next week. But his research investigates Earth's dynamic crust. Professor White is currently studying internal structures of volcanoes in Iceland and New Zealand. I like New Zealand a lot better than Iceland. It's too cold there. But he did become a household word when Delta Airlines and all the other airlines were unable to fly across the North Atlantic Ocean, and they lost a lot of revenue. And he was on CNN, everything you can imagine, talking about this, and became very well known. Now, this is what's better. As I would say with certainty, over the years, as my Christian understanding has grown, it has done nothing but fill me with greater certainty that the Christian gospel is truth that all the world desperately needs to hear, and that I am completely unworthy of the grace God has shown to me. That is really good. That's really good, yeah. That's really good. I knew I'd meet him eventually, so here we are. John Suppy is now retired as a Princeton faculty member. His experience, very similar to mine. He began long, lonely search for God as Princeton faculty member. I began the search for God as faculty member at Berkeley, and things happened. This is a little bit of his life history. It says he was vaguely aware of some spiritual needs, began attending services in Princeton Chapel, then reading the Bible and other Christian books. He eventually committed himself to Christ and had his first real experience of Christian fellowship in Taiwan, where he was on prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship. I've spoken to this group of Christian faculty in Taiwan, and they are pretty inspiring. Yes, I'm going to skip that. This is from Charlie Towns. Charlie's neighbor's going to go up here eventually. There it is. Charlie Towns, maybe the greatest experimental scientist of the 20th century. Nobel Prize in Physics and discovery of lasers. Everybody in this room has been benefited by lasers. And this is from his book, Making Waves. Now, that's supposed to be clever, because lasers are wave-like phenomenon. So if you're a nerd like I am, this is cool. If you're not, it's his life. And he says, this is chapter 9 or thereabouts. Just where does God come into this? Perhaps my account may give you some answer, but to me, it's almost a pointless question. If you believe in God at all, there's no particular where. He's always there, everywhere. He's in all these things. To me, God is personal, yet omnipresent, a great source of strength who has made an enormous difference to me. So, and he's talked about his life as a Christian with Clement. And again, this is Charlie Towns again. In my view, the question of origin seems always left unanswered, at least, or from a scientific view alone. Thus, I believe there's a need for some religious or metaphysical explanation. I believe in the concept of God and in his existence. Yeah, and this is from the same book in the different posts. So there could be some controversy about that, even among Christians, but go with that. John Polkingort, well, we've got a few Cambridgians here. Yeah, and John Polkingort, to many, is considered the other professor of theoretical physics at Cambridge. And it's true. This is his thing. I take God very seriously indeed. I'm a Christian believer, but I believe that God exists and made himself known in human terms in Jesus Christ. Yeah, Alan Sandage, was passed very recently, never got the Nobel Prize. He was the greatest observational cosmologist of the 20th century. Never got the Nobel Prize. He did get this $500,000 Crawford Prize from the Academy of Sciences. They don't give a Nobel Prize for astrophysics or cosmology. And this is his thing. He says, the nature of God is not to be found within any part of the field of the sciences. For that, one must turn to the scriptures. And then he's going to say some more too. Yeah. In his chapter in this book, he's asked this question that many of us have asked: can a person be a scientist and also be a Christian? And this is what he said. I know how he should have answered this question. He becomes a Christian. He's 50 years old. He was down in the Atacama Desert, Chile, the best stove. All the best cosmological equipment is gathered. And, they don't get to use these machines for a long period of time. They probably get 20 minutes and they have to go outside. And he went outside and there's no atmosphere at all. Looks up and sees all the water in the head of the body and says, there must be a God. Well, that's not what did it for him. Not what did it for him. He says this: the world is, he says, biology made me do it. He says, biology made me do it. The world is too complicated, all its parts and infection to be due to chance alone. I'm convinced that the existence of life, with all its order in each of its organs, is simply too well put together. Here's my friend George Ellis. I met George George took me to lecture in Cape Town about 4 years ago because we had some common interests. He's a heroic guy. Some of you will know this book with Hawking, Large-Scale Structure of Space-Time. I think this is the only monograph Hawking ever published on science. He's taught a lot of books on other subjects, but I think this is his only scientific monograph. Ellis, courageous opponent of the apartheid system. In fact, he always got right to the point where they're going to put him in jail for the rest of his life, and then it didn't happen. Partly because he was so famous, but partly because he didn't see any sense in going to jail. Be able to do as much in jail as out of jail. This is God's nature is revealed perfectly in the life and teachings of Jesus and others. That's what it's for in the New Testament. I had dinner. My wife and I had dinner with George and wife in Munich this past summer, and we are working together on a grant proposal to the Templeton Foundation. And we passed the first track, and the rest of it will be successful. It's a project about how biological systems depend on the values of the fundamental constants. That's what our project is about. If you're one of the reviewers, the money. John Barrow. I don't think John Barrow was here tonight. If he did, I'd say, look, I know John Barrow when he was a youth. Okay? When he was a lecturer or something like that, if you know it, please relate his story to me because if it's right. And he used to come to Berkeley every January, February. And he said, at least then it was a really quiet night. Anything know it? Still a quiet night? That's so quiet. Yeah, well, he'd show up at with a group of Christian faculty that once a week at the house for lunch. And didn't say much. And finally, I had to ask him one question: How come you're only here in January and February? And he said, "Have you ever been to England in January?" Yeah, let that go. So that's why he was there. But finally, before I left Berkeley, I figured out that he was a very distinguished physicist, cosmologist, and was doing some nice things. And then he got the call to Cambridge in Polkinghorne's old chair. When he got the Templeton Prize, he said this: I certainly don't believe there's some fundamental difference or conflict between a theistic or Christian perspective of the world and the practice of science. And he got the money. What is it, $1.5 million US and it's a fair amount of money.
It's true to be just a little bit more than a Nobel Prize.
Okay, that's right. Okay, Bill Phillips, Nobel Prize in Physics, 1967. methods to cool and trap atoms with laser light. And the day the Nobel Prize was announced, this is what he said. God has given us an incredibly fascinating world to live in, to explore. He said, newscapers on the Nobel Prize Day on the beach, like he has participated in a conference on high-towered telescopes. Philip, in 48, he got the prize, forms and sings in the gospel choir of the Fairhaven United Methodist Church, a multiracial congregation, about 300 in Gaithersburg there, teaches Sunday school at Leeds Bible study. That's kind of on the first page of the New York Times. You know, the big story is there, and then on the 8th page, there's some more about this. And the story I found most interesting is that, at least at that time in his life, he and his wife would go into downtown Washington, D.C., 30 miles away, and pick up an African-American lady, 80 or 90 years old, and they would take her out shopping, did her shopping for her, and then take her to dinner, and then take her back. So there's genuineness there. My dear friend Don Page, you gotta love this guy. I mean, if you think I'm a nerd, you actually top Page. Wow. It was it's quite. So he's collaborating with Stephen Hawking on a number of topics, and he probably is Hawking's best-known student, I think, and they remain they're good friends. Here's a statement. You can find this statement in a few physics textbooks. It says, "I'm a conservative Christian in the sense of pretty much taking the Bible seriously for what it says. Of course, I know that certain parts are not intended to be read literally, so I'm not precisely a literalist, but I try to believe in the message I think it's intended to have." He invited me to the University of Alberta to give an earlier version of this lecture. And when we were done, it was about noon. I was expecting lunch. So Schaefer, come in my office. I have a few questions to ask you. Well, he really didn't ask me any questions. Those of you who know that will appreciate it. But I did get a chance to ask him one question, which was, what do you mean by this part of the Bible not intended to read? But little bit, he acted like I was just from some other planet. And said, "You think that when God in the Psalms says that he shelters his children under his wings, says God trying to describe himself as a big chicken?" Amen. So that was the end of that discussion. But it went on until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I got no lunch that day. I said to Don, "Give me something new. Well, something I could share with young people." And so he gave me this. He says, "If the universe basically is very simple, what all theoretical physicists dream up, the theological implications of this would need to be worked out. Perhaps the mathematical simplicity of the universe is reflection of the personal simplicity of the gospel message. That God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to bridge the gap between him and each of us who have rejected God or rejected what he wants for us on rebelling against his will and disobeying him. This is a message simple enough even to be understood by children." And this guy, there is a consistency about his life. He's got a whole house full of young children from Haiti that he and his wife adopted. Chris Isham. Okay. I didn't know Chris Isham. He had to give a version of this lecture in Imperial College, and finished about 12. He said, "Schaefer, I've got a few questions for you." Well, I'm getting hungry, and I've already had this experience with Page and Eugene. It's just not looking good for the tummy. Well, I went in his office, and we talked for an hour, and then he took me out to a wonderful Indian restaurant, and we had a great time. So my concern about the lunch that day was unnecessary. Paul Davies, maybe known to some of you, describes Chris Isham's London's Britain's great quantum gravity expert. No, we don't have to take issue with that proclamation. But this is what he gave me. I said, "Well, give me something I could give." So the God of Christianity is not only the ground of being, here he's alluding to Paul Tillich, he is also incarnate. Essential therein is the vision of the resurrection as the new creation under the old order, and the profound notion of the redemption of time through the life and death of Jesus Christ. Now, be careful of this next sentence, because you could misinterpret it. I think it will be rather a long time before theoretical physics has anything useful to add to that. I mean, you could take that in context. Oh, this guy doesn't think theoretical physics is very interesting. No, he is passionate about theoretical physics. He's committed his entire professional life to theoretical physics. He's just saying that what he knows about Jesus Christ is more valuable. Now back to England again. I'm just. You guys know that at all? Don't know. It's at Oxford. Who are they? That's okay. Professor of physics at Oxford, one of the institutes, and here's his thing. Yeah, this is what he does: molecular physics. Anything in molecular physics without. This is what he says: Christianity makes far more sense than does atheism. Well, that's pretty fair statement. First, it makes sense of our rationality. Its source is ultimately God. Second, it makes sense of morality. God provides the ultimate reference of what is good. Third, it makes sense historically. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus is evidence that he was the Logos, the Word made flesh. That is, God expressing himself in given form. Oh, I know this person closer than any of the ones I've to Jim Torrey's the professor in 6 different departments at Rice University. Many awards. His paper in 2005 was the second most highly cited. It's a good paper. He's a nano person, and this is what he gave me to share. He has his own website. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I guess anybody could do it. You have to pay. You have your own website. You have to pay for it. Oh yes, this young man. This is you have to pay for it. Okay, well I'll pass then. He said, I was born and raised in Jew in the New York City area, and I remained a Jew. In 1977, while a college student at Syracuse University, I came to the realization that Jesus Christ is indeed Jewish Messiah. I asked Jesus Christ to forgive me for my sins and to come into my heart. And if you're interested in these things, write down that website, because it's got many other things in there besides that. Kees Dekker, another good friend at Delft, University of Technology in the Netherlands, recipient of the Spinoza Award, Netherlands' most prestigious scientific award. Many accolades from the other side of as well. Carbon nanotubes, other contributions. And this is a good statement here. All my life, I experienced a deep sense of wonder about the world, as well as a deep sense of purpose. After a lot of internal thinking and external discussion, I have concluded that an atheistic worldview fits the reality of the world very badly. I find it, for example, utterly unconvincing that the human mind is at bottom merely the result of random atomic motions. The alternative view, where the human mind is a real entity that derives from the mind of God, appears much more rational to me. And more recently, in the Christian worldview, I've discovered a grand story in which many things fall in place. Life has a purpose. The human mind is not delusion, but real. A universal moral exists and derives from God. Relations with God and our neighbor are most important. Science is a fantastic activity to explore nature, for which we can honor God. History is a linear process that begins with the Big Bang, God's creative act. And at a personal level, I found that living with the living God, Jesus Christ, makes my life utterly fulfilling. There's another one of these nano guys from Oxford. Well, we'll go through in there, because I know that in Cambridge, Oxford is a lesser institution. What's so cool is it's a symmetrical relationship. In Oxford, Cambridge is a lesser organization. Carbon nanomaterials, interbreaks. And this is good too. Yeah, he's done a good job on this. The fusion of the worlds of information and the physical world, these are the same things put together, should not come as a surprise to the Christian believer. This was foreseen in the Old Testament, where the Word of God was often has the properties of something that is effective in the world. In the opening chapter of the Gospel, John describes how the Word, Jesus Christ, becomes visible. I'm going to skip this one because it's too long. It's really good. It's too long. I'm not going to give you all of the jar. The woods are full of earnest Christians who are scientists. You're going to old in Karlsruhe, Germany, example. Gerhard Hurdle, Nobel Prize, in Berlin, Nobel Prize in Third Street, 2008. Andy Carsley, Princeton, Richard Butte, Stanford, Norma Farch, Oxford, Thomas Rizzo, EPFL, Troy McMorris, MIT, Gerald Gabriels, Harvard, and so I don't have time to talk about all these stories because we might get kicked out. We're going to skip this. Yeah, this is one of the best statements. This takes too long. He really does a great job of relating his faith in Christ to his scientific work in some detail. Well, we're not going to do that either. But we could ask this question again: why let a scientist become a Christian? The extraordinary fine-tuning of the universe points to a sovereign creator God. Consider these testimonies from skeptics. So these are all unbelievers who are uncomfortable about the facts. Paul Davis, Paul Davis might be some kind of a vague theist. I'm not quite sure. But present arrangement of matter indicates a very special choice of initial conditions. Again, choice implies a chooser. Stephen Hawking, and he may not feel as kind of nowadays as he was when he wrote this, if one considers the possible constants and laws that have emerged, the odds against such a universe are immense. And Fred Boyle, it's always quotable. A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology. Throw them all in, and that there are no blind forces. We're speaking about nature. These are responses to this fine-tuning business. Francis Collins, when he stood next to Bill Clinton and announced the first successes of the Human Genome Project, he said, "It's humbling for me and awe-inspiring to realize that we've caught the first glimpses of our own instruction book previously known only to God." And then he goes on here. Yeah, this is all the stuff he did. I mean, before he became a bureaucrat, he discovered physicists since a fibrosis gene. Why am I deciding I'm a Christian? Well, biology. Yeah, I've talked about it. I'm not reading that. This is pretty good. This is from his a paper he published in Web in Science and Christian Belief. This is one of your guys' journals, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. He talks about how he was sent off to church to learn music. I can't read this, and you probably can't either. Self-church, but told to very strictly avoid the theology. And he goes off to his studies, and furthermore, and as soon as he gets there, his freshman colleagues are all telling him how ridiculous belief in anything is. They were real ethics of scientism. And he says, I became an obnoxious atheist, not just an atheist, but an obnoxious atheist that you would not have enjoyed having lunch with. And pointed out that anything that couldn't be determined by science was irrelevant. And yet he says this, fortunately, through the guidance of, so this is years later now, this is the guidance of some very crazy people who tolerated a lot of insult questions. I would let to read C.S. Lewis and then the Bible, and so was led to understand many of the concepts that had completely eluded me before, and I gave my life to Christ 20 years ago. I'm back to Cambridge. Some of you know some kind of reports, I'm sure, don't you? Sure. Yeah. Paleobiologist. Up in the Royal Society at age 39. That's not bad. That's not bad. This is good. He says, concerning the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, forget the libel of the first Christians being credulous peasants and hysterical women. These were hard-nosed individuals, far more familiar with the realities of life than most of us. What was happening was simply incredible. You hardly have to read between the lines. All this crystallized in the resurrection. In those few years of Jesus' ministry, a reliable history can be reconstructed. That's a really good statement. Oh, now this gets onto some other things. Yes. Let me just say a little bit, just a tiny bit more. This business of the resurrection was very important to me when I became a Christian. Very much 4th year as a professor at Berkeley. And there are a lot of good things that have been written about this. N.T. Wright's book, The Resurrection of the Son of God, is a great book, but it's a number of pages long. I have 2 copies of it. When people act like they really want to get into this environment, but they're shorter books that are also good. This work by William Lane Craig, only 150 pages. The sun also rises to historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. So they're good things too. And this in the book is can you read the title?
Conflict or coherence.
Yeah, it's kind of like it. Now, I didn't choose my title. Who chose my title for me? Somebody did. But it's what I wanted to study, but somebody else chose it. It's why I was some of this. He's a great book. Get up. Okay, so concluding remarks. A lot of scientists are Christians. Not all. A few of the ones who are not are quite outspoken, as Rick Smalley was, and changed their minds. So I hope I've conveyed that and be glad to answer any questions. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks.